For quite a few years, Coyote Pass was marketed as the next big thing for the Brown family. Not only land, but the heritage. A place where all the wives would grow old together, where the kids would come, where plural marriage would finally be successful. Kody assured it was freedom. He said it was equality. He referred to it as the only thing that would keep the family together when everything else was falling apart. However, in Season 20, Episode 11, the situation is different. There is no screaming, no dramatic walk-offs, just a quiet conversation, and suddenly, the fissures become very evident. Because when the questions become serious, about ownership, about money, about who really has the land, the answers are not there. Instead, there is a presence of tension, deflection, and a man who appears to know the truth but is reluctant to say it openly. That moment is when the fans come to know an uncomfortable truth. Coyote Pass was not really about the building of a future together. It was about control, who had it, and who was gradually losing everything. And once you recognize it, you can't unrecognize it. Before Coyote Pass turned into a disagreement, a confusion, and a quiet resentment, it was marketed as something completely different. It was hope. It was a promise. It was the place where Kody Brown said everything would finally make sense. In the initial seasons of Sister Wives, the audience was watching a family that still had faith in the concept of us. It was not flawless, far from it, but there was a common vision. Kody was constantly talking about legacy. He referred to land in the way that other people speak of safety and belonging. For him, real estate was not just land and trees. It was the proof that plural marriage could work if everyone stayed committed. The first time the idea of buying the land at Coyote Pass came up, it was like wiping the slate clean. The mountain, the open space, the quiet. Kody pictured it as a place where all the wives would have equal rights. Different houses, of course, but united by a goal. He drew a picture of the future where nobody would be jealous anymore and the family would become even stronger because they opted for unity every single day. The wives were eager to believe him. Mary interpreted it as salvation. After numerous years of emotional estrangement and being left out, the land stood for getting important once again. A place where her investment, both financially and emotionally, would be finally acknowledged. For Mary, Coyote Pass was not about gaining power. It was about showing that she was still part of the group. Janelle saw things in a different way. She was a down-to-earth, rational, future-oriented kind of person. She believed in preparing and being fair. The figures had to make sense, and if they did, she would believe in the vision. Janelle was sure that Coyote Pass could turn into something real if all were honest and committed. She believed that if money was shared, then ownership would be shared too. Christine saw even more spiritual or emotional aspects. She envisioned the family coming together, laughing, children running freely across open land. After being emotionally neglected for years, she thought this move would make them closer. That getting rooted together both figuratively and literally might heal the wounds that words can't. Also, Robin, the newest wife at that time, was totally on board with the dream. She talked about wanting one big family and never wanting to be separate. She was publicly supporting Kody's vision, thus making it easier for people to believe that Coyote Pass was about togetherness, not favoritism. Then the sacrifices started. The money was combined. Proceeds from the sale of the homes were invested back into the plan. Stability was exchanged for faith. Each wife relinquished something that was real and tangible in exchange for something that was promised but not yet realized. And they did it because there was still trust at that time, because they believed the man who said, "This is for all of us," by the way he stood in front of them. What made the dream so powerful was not only the land but also the word. Kody never wavered in his statements. Forever, family legacy, our future. He portrayed Coyote Pass not as an option, but as a necessity. And when people take something to be their destiny, they stop questioning it. That is what Episode 11 silently compels us to do. With what we know now, if one goes back to those first moments and watch, one sees that the promises were made on an emotional level, but the details were left unmentioned. They spoke of ownership without really defining it. They pushed their timelines without giving an explanation. And they always said that they would be accountable for later, while leaving the responsibility to be borne by someone else. At that time, no one was opposing them. Hope does not question, it trusts. Theoretically, Coyote Pass was to be the very instance that would demonstrate that the Browns were a different kind of people, that plural marriage is not necessarily going to bring about division in the end, that sharing sacrifice will bring about sharing security. What no one, however, was aware of at that time was this. Above all, the dream demanded one thing: complete honesty. And without it, even the most beautiful promise starts to decay. Even though in Season 20, Episode 11, the hope is still there, it doesn't seem genuine any longer. Because a dream doesn't die all at once. They slowly fade until the moment when you suddenly find yourself standing on empty land and wondering where the future has gone. When Season 20, Episode 11 comes around, the dream of Coyote Pass is no longer shining with hope. Instead, there is tension in the air, which is subtle but yet undeniable. The tension starts to surface slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it becomes impossible to overlook. And the cause? Questions. Questions that have been building up for years but have only now found a voice. Janelle is the one who speaks first, not in anger. Her voice is not raised, and there is no dramatics. She is just calm, measured, and firm. She leans forward and utters what is on everyone's mind but has hardly ever been expressed. Who really owns this land? It is a question that carries a lot of weight. Underneath the surface, it is about trust, fairness, and the financial and emotional aspects that have been slowly mounting for almost a decade. Kody is visibly uncomfortable. He chuckles, but it appears to be forced. He gives evasive answers, only partly explaining, relating incidents, and referring to promises made by him several years back. However, the actual figures, what is there, what was paid, what is left, are not easy to find. The details of ownership, which were taken for granted by everyone as straightforward, are now felt to be deliberately obscure. The dream of a shared legacy suddenly turns out to be like a tower of cards, resting precariously on unconfirmed claims and assumptions. Mary starts off by watching in silence, but as Janelle keeps on questioning her, she begins to comprehend a brutal reality. Her court case is not as strong as she thought. Her sacrifices, money, time, and emotional energy were not as safe as she had presumed. Her shining dream that she had been carrying for years suddenly starts to lose its brightness. She only very briefly displays a mixture of confusion, betrayal, and disappointment on her face. The realization is not very loud, but it is deep. The trust on which she had built her hopes now appears to be weak, almost a little bit naive when looking back. On the other hand, Kody is losing his control over his feelings. The questions put forward in a polite manner but still persisted, and they touched a very sensitive spot. Where before he used charm, persuasion, and the power of his promises, he is now using defensiveness. He deflects by changing the subject, using inappropriate humor, and telling stories that only partially correspond to the truth in order to explain the inconsistencies. His voice becomes more and more aggressive, and for the first time in the series, the audience sees that he is struggling with the scrutiny. The discomfort in the room is noticeable, although everybody is calm. It is present in the breaks of the conversation, in the looks from the corner of the eyes, and in the unuttered recognition of the fact that something very basic has changed. The dream, unity, equality, forever was no longer there as a matter of course. Every carefully planned word, every polite answer, every attempt to brush off the questions are now closely examined. Janelle is very composed during the whole time, which is a contrast that emphasizes Kody's uneasiness. She does not interrupt or accuse. She simply requires clarity. The quiet power of her method changes the emotional level of the scene from a confrontation to the weight filled with tension. It is not anger that makes Kody uncomfortable, but rather certainty. She is aware of what she wants, transparency. Moreover, she is not leaving until she gets it. Mary deepens the discomfort in the room by her reactions. The camera is aimed to small changes in her facial features, a furrowed brow, a slight change in her body position, a hand clenching more tightly around a cup. She starts understanding that the basis which she thought were the mutual promises, the unity, the shared sacrifices, is far from being as solid as she had thought. The emotional and financial sides of things begin to conflict with each other. Trust becomes uncertain, silence extends, and the audience, in that very silence, can feel the tension growing like a storm cloud over Coyote Pass. At the time of this episode segment, there is a very quiet but strong feeling of tension in the room. The change in the air is already there, even though nothing has gone beyond the limits. Yet, the dream that once was full of light and hope now brings the shades of doubt. Every word, every look, every pause, and even Kody's defensiveness are there for quite some time. Defensiveness is not about immediate threats now. It is about the gradual understanding that the control is getting away, and that getting clearer may reveal those truths which he does not want others to see. Episode 11 is not about loud fights or dramatic confrontations. It is about trust slowly falling apart. and the questions that unveil the cracks, as well as the quiet unease that is preparing the ground for the revelations which are yet to come. And the viewers see it as well, the very moment when the dream starts to break and the dreamers begin seeing the reality under it. In Season 20, Episode 11, the tension in the room becoming very clear is not brought by argument or anger, but by the things that are not said. Kody Brown, the man who has for a long time positioned himself as the conductor of the Brown family's vision, is now, in a rather surprising manner, run out of words in the moments he is confronted with. And it is exactly in these silent moments that the story gets the most revealing. Initially, it is only subtle. There is a pause here, a hesitation there. However, Janelle relentlessly continues with her direct and thoughtful questions dealing with finance and ownership, and at the same time, Kody's evasions become more difficult to get away from. Instead of shedding light on the issues everyone is concerned about, he rather sidesteps. He tries to avoid the questions, making general comments about the heritage and family unity, while at the same time not giving the slightest hint of a concrete answer. With every non-answer, the tension escalates more and more, thus focusing more on the unspoken side of Kody's words, that is to say, those he is avoiding rather than those he is uttering. Kody has used before this method allure, persuasion, and verbal skill to change the subject or bring the spotlight somewhere else. But in Episode 11, the result is just opposite. His usual tricks do not work. The calm and determined Janelle's questioning exposes the holes in his story. Viewers are very clear about it. Kody is in an awkward position. His smile is not genuine. He becomes rigid in his movements. Also, his voice, which was earlier very confident and convincing, now becomes more sharp and brittle. The more he tries to bring clarity, the more it appears that he is trying to cover the omissions which he can no longer overlook. Then the change in his attitude becomes very clear. Control and authority that he displayed previously are now accompanied by a slight irritation. Words which were earlier very carefully chosen to calm down now show that there is some tension. A joke here, a defensive statement there, but always with a nervous tone. Kody is a person who used to be able to create the story as per his liking, and thus, how the family views him, to be in control. However, in Episode 11, he is merely responding, not directing. For the first time, the weight of the questions is greater than the weight of his responses. He is losing control, and the audience is aware of it. It is not only the wives who see the change, viewers are also very much aware of it. The camera does not move away from the small things. Kody's hand playing with the papers on the table, a slight frown on his forehead, the way he is leaning back instead of forward. All these visuals tell more than words coming from the script. Every break and carefully avoided answer are exactly what Janelle and Mary are figuring out. He is uneasy because he knows that truth might no longer be on his side. This episode subtly uncovers Kody's tendency to blame others when things go wrong. When confronted, he insinuates that wives are not capable of understanding the financial side of things and that they have misunderstood the previous promises. It is not very accusative, but the idea is quite obvious. If there are any problems, it is because others did not follow his plan, not because the plan itself is flawed. By shifting the responsibility to others, Kody for a short while is taking the heat off himself but not from the audience. The viewers, now experienced due to the years of watching, are not deceived by the well-put-up facade. They feel the vulnerability underneath. The emotional goal of this section is suspicion, and Episode 11 achieves it flawlessly. Silence here is not a mere passive one. It is, in fact, a communicative act of its own. Every unknown question, every elusive answer, makes the feeling that there is a secret hid grow stronger and stronger. The viewers start doubting Kody in a way that the wives maybe haven't even realized yet. The one who is supposed to be the authority and in control is now seen as defensive, even a bit vulnerable. Outside of this particular moment, the point of this scene is very important. It is not a climax of shouting or confrontation. Instead, it is a very slow, very intentional uncovering of the fact that the Brown family is no longer under Kody's control. His failure to provide answers, his dodging of questions, and even his slight aggravation touch on a moment of change. The dream of togetherness, the carefully fashioned image of Coyote Pass, and the delicately balanced hierarchy he had been able to maintain for years are now being questioned. Also, what is the most powerful element here? The wives are not screaming, and the audience is not being informed. Kody's silence is the communicator of everything. It is in the silence that suspicion is growing. It is in the breaks that the truth is starting to get out. The man who was considered to be above all is now the one who is subjected to questions that he cannot fully handle. The tension is so close to being overwhelming, and the viewers are left with the feeling that the next moment when the truth, no matter how hurtful it is, will be finally revealed, is what follows. At the end of Section 3, one thing is evident. Episode 11 has transformed silent doubting into a reflection of Kody's frailty. Suspicion has ceased to be just a feeling. It has become a lens through which the entire episode is now seen. And once suspicion settles in, trust starts to dismantle. At the midpoint of Season 20, Episode 11, the atmosphere in the room has changed. What initially were search questions have turned into something far more subtle but also much more powerful. Janelle, one of the Brown wives, has found a new way. She no longer needs to elevate her voice, implore for answers, or fight for recognition. Rather, she uses a far more potent weapon than confrontation: serene reasoning and measured detachment. In the past, quarrels with Kody would frequently result in loud bursts of arguments. People would shout heavily, throw accusations at each other, get emotional, and the drama would unfold itself for the cameras. But Episode 11 turns things around. Janelle stays silent, her demeanor is calm, and her eyes are firm. She makes incisive inquiries concerning finances at Coyote Pass, ownership, and future plans, but does so without the use of any theatricality. Every word is intentional. Every phrase is of great importance, and yet there is a gentleness in her voice, almost like a neutrality. What makes this point so extraordinary is the difference between Kody's normal behavior and this situation. For a long time, he has been successful in a role filled with disorder. He used the tension to have dominance over the talks, to shift the responsibility, to make the other people doubt themselves. However, calm and logical questioning, done with authority and without anger, is a power that he is hardly able to control. Janelle is not responding to his evasions with action. She is not debating with him. She only maintains her position, and that is the thing which, more than anything, makes him uncomfortable. The audience may notice the result almost straight away. Kody cannot stay still in his chair. He tries to say something by opening his mouth, but the words come out hurried, defensive, and incoherent. There is no winning attitude in his speech, no deliberately constructed grin to divert from the fact. He finds out, almost too late, that what he saw as weakness is actually his opponent's power. This is the power Janelle has at the very peak of its existence. She is not obliged to heighten the conflict. She is not required to dramatize the scene for gaining attention or getting the approval of others. Her power is coming from her capability of staying calm, of giving the reality, of establishing the limits without needing yes from the others or any applause. Kody, for the very first time in years, has to face a person who is not going to be influenced by manipulation or charm. Even with their silence, the two are like a current running through the air, electrifying them. With every single question Janelle asks, she is making Kody see his decreasing power by showing him his rank in front of others. Avoid diverting glances, uneasy moments, incomplete sentences. All of them signify changing power dynamics from Kody to Janelle. The viewers can sense the shift. They realize that in the present conversation, the power has been moved quietly but irrevocably from the one who used to set the terms, to the one who just stayed there but refused to be intimidated. The other wives are, at the same time, observing the scene and reacting, though their reactions being subtle and not obvious. They are showing, through their faces, that they are relieved as well as acknowledging the fact that Janelle's tactic is working. They are praising her for her self-control, and they are getting the idea that this might be the path logic, clarity, and calmness instead of emotional confrontation. Janelle's strategy's brilliance lies in the fact that it is not dependent on sensationalism. There are no fireworks of emotions, a battle of shouting, or tearful revealing. The power is in her endurance and in her being precise. Every single word coming out of her mouth is a needle in Kody's long-established narrative balloon. By the time it is over, the man is left standing at the very unbalanced moment. She is the one who decides the terms of the reply, not him. That is pointed out very clearly in the episode 11. The drama is not about who shouts loudest or who gets out of the room most quickly. It is about an undercover plan, emotional intelligence, and self-confidence. For the audience, it is a revelation. The drama is not from chaotic situations, it comes from empowerment, when watching an underestimated person asserting themselves without using aggression. The silent power of Janelle's moment is like a stain that cannot be removed. It shows that power is not always noisy, rather. It can be somewhat clear, consistent, and calm in its determination. And to Kody, this comes as a painful lesson. He has come against a power he cannot control, a way he cannot manipulate, and a wife who is not going to be distracted by charm or theatrics. At the end of this part, one thing is beyond dispute. Quiet, controlled confidence is capable of breaking someone's control facade much faster than anger or confrontation could ever do. And as the audience is observing, they get a strong feeling of empowerment not only for Janelle but also for any person who has had to face the challenge of manipulation and respond with calm and logic. When Coyote Pass was revealed to be the cause of conflict rather than the place of unity, Season 20, Episode 11 of Sister Wives came to an end. The questions had been asked, the answers had been avoided, the reason had been brought to work, and now this part, coming to terms with it, was left with no option to anyone. This can be interpreted as a very touching moment in the series which brought the Brown family to reflect on what's really important in their lives. It became clear in that quiet, charged room that this land wasn't home. Mary said it best. The land didn't fail the family. The illusion of trust did, and once that trust fades, even the most beautiful dream becomes just empty ground. While the wives first received the revelation as a shock, it soon became very apparent to them. It was a property, not a symbol of family legacy, but rather leverage. It is a means. It is the concrete representation of one person having power over others and being inevitably reminded of the imbalance, power struggles, and the resentments which are not even spoken about. Along with it coming into focus are the financial investments, the emotional sacrifices, and the years of planning not as fulfillment but as being reminded of the times when it was not really equal. Mary, who for years had believed in Kody's words, is now feeling very mixed emotions of frustration and sadness. Her sacrifices, compromises, patience, and belief in fairness suddenly seem to be overshadowed by the harsh truth. The very dream of belonging and shared legacy disintegrates silently and leaves a bit of longing which is hard to put into words. Instead of uniting, the land has become the dividing line, a stark reminder of the promises that have not been kept. Dissimilarly, Janelle comes to the realization in a different way. The episode's scene of her quiet power moment has already had an effect on the interaction. She is able to see the land as a reflection of control rather than commitment, and freedom is what she finds in that recognition. Here, acceptance is not accompanied by anger. There are no dramatics involved. Instead, it results in clarity, the capability to see the truth and accept it without denial. The land will never be the dream. It will never be a safe place Kody talked about. But this insight gives her the opportunity to take back her own power, make her own decisions, and shape her own future. While Kody is aware of the change, he finds it hard to explain. He senses that the control he has over the situation is waning. The ways in which he used to get his way through charm, misdirection, and appeal to authority are now being met with calm, unwavering clarity from the women around him. The realization comes not just to the wives, but also to him, that the storyline he has been weaving for years is coming apart, and the land he saw as a gift to the future is rather a sign of separation. Still, the moment of acknowledging the truth is far from being a melodramatic one. It is rather quiet, almost imperceptible, but it is of great importance as it corresponds to years of putting money, hope, and trust into something. The camera stays long on the women's faces, expressions that are very controlled, and the eyes showing comprehension and resignation. They do not argue or plead anymore. They do not seek reassurance. They simply recognize the truth. The dream of Coyote Pass has ended, not with a great show, but with sober clarity. This is the emotional core of episode 11 for the audience. This is the turning point of the narrative from conflict to reflection. They see all the financial issues, evasions, silent power plays, and the use of logic coming together in a single, indisputable truth. The land is no longer a shared future, it is a mirror reflecting the cracks that were there all along. The dream of going to live together has been replaced by the harsh reality of leverage, control, and division. However, there is some beauty in that harsh truth. Acceptance leads to clarity. It enables the women to leave the past behind and move forward with a clear head and a strong sense of purpose. They are now fully aware of the forces working against them and of the reality of their situation. They can make their plans, take care of their safety, and regain their freedom. Even though the dream has been shattered, the knowledge they have gained is a different kind of power. The very end of episode 11 is a quiet, profound understanding rather than a dramatic confrontation or fireworks. It wasn't really home for Coyote Pass. It was always just a reflection of the power dynamics within the family. And for the wives who can finally see it clearly, acceptance is the first step toward freedom. The land didn't fail the family. The illusion of trust did. And once that trust fades, even the most beautiful dream becomes just empty ground.